We have two wonderful experts today. We have Cyndi Greeley, AAA's brand marketing manager, and Daniel Armbruster coming in live from Texas. He's our senior media specialist. They're going to be sharing some awesome tips and tricks on what it means to go from vision to impact, creating memorable traffic safety art. So without further ado, I would love to hand it over to Cyndi, and she can go ahead and kick us off with this wonderful presentation. Cyndi, take it away.
Thanks, Roman. What an intro that was. Anyway, so my name's Cyndi. As Roman was saying, I'm the brand marketing manager for AAA in Southern California, and just thought I'd give you a little background on me before we start, because I wanted you to be aware that these tips are from the agency side as well as the corporate side of communications. So no matter where you are, you would get these types of tips, and they're great tips for you to take forward in any type of communication, any kind of video that you create. So I wanted to give you that just as a little backdrop. So Roman, you can go to the next slide. So we're going to play a couple videos for you, and at the end of this, I'm going to just want you to guess, to yourself, what do all of these campaigns have in common? So Roman, why don't you take it away and play these three videos for the team?
There. I'm going to try this one more time. There we go.
Todd's in the hospital.
From vaping. Promise you won't vape, Emma.
Not cool.
Wacky sitcom teens aren't the best people to talk to your kid about vaping.
Hey, you got a minute?
You are. Talk to your child about vaping today.
That's the first one.
Is there anyone out there who still isn't clear about what doing drugs does? Okay, last time. This is your brain. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
Be right there. Wait. Use the shovel and bucket of water, remember? Drown, stir, drown, feel. Then make sure it's cool.
Where'd you learn that?
SmokeyBear.com. Brushed up on some tips before we left. Don't want to start a wildfire, right?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
So there's a newer one, there's some older campaigns there, but I'm sure you've seen those out there, especially Smokey the Bear. I know that everyone can relate to Smokey the Bear, but those three campaigns all have one thing in common, and it's a sound strategy. And the strategy behind that campaign is going to guide everything you do on this project, because it's your North Star. And your strategy is just, if you look at the slide here, obviously it gives you a very technical description. It's an overall plan that guides the development of advertising messages and campaigns. But what you'll see in the slides coming up is components of a strategy and things for you to think about when you're developing your strategy before you actually create your poster or your video. So what's in a strategy? So of course there's a background. Why are you creating the campaign? And by the way, I'm sure you know why you're creating the campaign. You probably knew that when you signed up for this. So that might be an easy step for you. But the next couple of steps, the objective and the strategy, is where it gets a little bit more, you got to really kind of think about it. because the objective is, what is the overall goal of your messaging? And that can be to educate people, that can be to change behaviors, that can be, and in other advertising campaigns, sometimes you want to, sell a product, but in this, obviously you're going to be educating, you're going to be trying to change some behaviors, but those are two different goals. So how you achieve those goals will be pretty interesting as you build your strategy. So your objective is, what is your goal? Your strategy is, how are you going to communicate it? So think of it like a football game, and Daniel can relate because he's at a football event tonight with us. But it's with a football game, it's, hey, your goal is to win the game, and your strategy is how you're going to win that game. Okay. So next up, there are some tips here in terms of certain things you want to focus on. And again, if you focus your message, it will make it a very compelling message for everyone to understand. So I'm going to take this a little bit out of order. So the primary selling points, or the reasons to believe, that's probably going to be your research. You're going to go through, you're going to conduct some research, and you're going to see all kinds of statistics out there that give you information on how to change behaviors or what you need to educate people on. Those are what we call reasons to believe, and those will cause action and or behavior shift here. The target audience is who you're talking to. Okay, so that's really important, because the way you speak to an audience can be different to a generation, and I'll get into that a bit later in the slides. And then the single most compelling idea. Now I can tell you that's going to be the focus of your message. The focus is going to be the most important thing you do here, because you're going to distill this down to one or two key things that you want to communicate. And I know we've gone around and around, even on things I've worked on over time to really get to that single most compelling idea. And I think that will be an interesting exercise for you to go through as well when you're crafting your strategy. Your tonality is how you want your communication to sound. Do you want it to sound engaging? Do you want it to sound light? Do you want it to sound happy? Do you want it to sound sad? Those are all tonality. The call to action is what you want the consumer to do. And your theme line can work for that. You can tell someone exactly what you want them to do in a theme line. And then, of course, there's always legal mandatories like disclaimers and logos. Obviously, you'll add those in, but you should make room for them, because those, we'll need to add those in, okay? Go to the next slide. So your tip number one is on your tonality and your target audience. And I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. You want to speak in ways that are relatable to your target audience. So once you determine who that audience is, and let's presume it might be, someone in your group, your age group, you're going to want it to sound like something that you would say to someone. But obviously, words have different meanings to different generations. So I just have an example here of what dope could mean to, Gen Z versus a millennial versus Gen X versus a boomer. It means something different to each generation. So you definitely want to speak to your audience in a way, where you're using words and phrases and things that mean something to them. Tip number two is to really focus your message. So you want to create your campaign to work in all environments. And I know it's going to seem like, wow, in a print ad or a poster, I'm going to have a lot more room to put a lot more information than I might say in a 15-second video. That's not necessarily true, because you're going to want that same focus to be in every single piece, so that if you're seeing a poster, or if you're seeing a video, or if you just hear an audio ad somewhere, you're going to have that same message no matter what environment you're in. And I always stick to the power of threes, because if you keep your messages short and you include a maximum of 3 points, your audience is more likely to absorb what you're telling them. You're going to see in this deck, all of these are focused in threes so that you can remember them. Tip number 3 is to provide a clear call to action. You want to tell your audience what you want them to do very clearly. You want to make that action clear in words and in visuals so that they're not competing with each other. And I'd also, if you can, keep your hashtags a little bit shorter and easier to remember, and or to type in an address bar, because if you can't remember it and you can't enter it in an address bar if you're not able to click on a link, and so you might not be able to get that message clear to your consumer. And that, I believe, is all I have.
That's awesome, Cyndi. And I love the fact that you said the power of threes, right? Tip 1, 2, and 3. And so what really helps us here today is to actually ask the teens that are here present with us, were you actually listening to the points that Cyndi was trying to drive home? So we shared with you that you're going to get some awesome little gifts from us here at AAA and from Streets Art Safe. So I want to see if you were actually listening. So I have now placed on your screen 4 questions, okay? Now, remember, there's no right or wrong answers, but if you get these answers right, I will find out, and I will be sending you a nice little gift in the mail to your school. So please, during this time, try to answer these questions to the best of your knowledge, right? The first one is, what did the 3 campaigns that we saw earlier have in common? What was Cyndi talking about there, right? The second one is, what was the first tip that Cyndi was sharing with us earlier? The third one is, what is tip 2? And the final one is, what is tip 3? All right, so I'm gonna give a moment here while our audience members are still trying to formulate their questions. Hopefully they took some notes. I gave them a hint earlier to grab a pen and paper, just in case. All right. Looks like our messages are coming in. And while we have that coming on, Daniel, I'll be unmuting your mic very shortly here, so we can get going. All right, I'm going to close the poll. Only a few of us have answered, huh? Come on now, this is for the little gifts and prizes. All right, I see more people answering. I'm going to go ahead and close the quiz in about 20 seconds, so we can give enough time for Daniel to do his presentation as well. All right, I got 10 more seconds. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're ending the poll. All right, I'll be able to find out who got these answers right. Give me a second here. But while we got that going on, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Daniel. Daniel, are you ready? Are you there?
I'm here, Roman. Thank you so much. And
I love it.
You said I'm at an event, so hopefully there's not too much background noise. But my presentation is going to focus a little bit more on video editing and editing a PSA. Now, of course, we're not going to go into the details of editing. That would take very long. I've been doing video editing for 25 years. I worked for CBS News as a video editor in my prior career. And then I came to the Auto Club for media relations, which we also do a lot of video editing. One of the things that we edit are PSAs for social media. So up first, we have 2 different PSAs that I want to show you. And I want you to notice what they have in common. They both have stories about victims who've been impacted by traffic safety issues, specifically distracted driving. So take a look at the first one, and then we'll play the next one right after Roman.
It's just a shame.
The hurt doesn't go away.
Trust me, it's one of the most devastating things that you can have when you lose a child.
A traffic standstill became the scene of a horrific crash.
Our daughter was killed over someone that had to get a text message to their boyfriend.
People say, you know, I couldn't believe that I could cry every day for years and years, and I still do.
We missed all of our life with her.
Do you want to take a child away from a parent or take a mother away from her kids? I mean, that's what it is. That's what it can be.
So that was part of our distracted driving campaign. Don't drive intoxicated, don't drive intoxicated. We have one more example of that. If Roman, if you want to go ahead and play that.
What happened to me is 100% preventable. Not only did he almost kill me, I am permanently injured. I don't know how I survived that. Recovery is painful. My quality of life is not what it used to be.
Keep going, keep going, keep going. Yeah.
Since I did survive, I can use my voice to advocate and hopefully keep this from happening to someone else.
There you go. Put down your phone. Lives depend on it. And the idea there in that second one was not everyone dies. Some people are injured permanently. So one thing you'll notice in the PSA video, there's a hook in the first 5 minutes. That hook is either a sound, a statement, or a fact. And it's supposed to hook the listener or the viewer into continuing to watch that video. You want to prioritize visual and audio quality in your PSA. And one thing that we like to use in these are real life testimonials because they evoke emotion and they make people realize these situations impact real lives. And as Cyndi pointed out, a strong call to action is really important in your video. Next slide, please. So defining your audience, who is it? Cyndi touched on this. What is their age? Where do they live? What do they know about this topic already? And what should they know? That's how you define your audience and really a good starting point, as Cyndi said, to help you with that North Star. Next slide. So when you're writing your script, you want to think about the different scenes that you're going to shoot. You can write your script or at least a shell of a script before you shoot your video. That'll help you kind of give an idea of what you need to film and what you need to narrate that will accompany each shot. Next slide. So shooting each scene, shoot the footage for each scene of your video. Remember to shoot extra footage, especially when you're newer at this. You really can't shoot too much footage. You don't want to end up in a situation where you don't have enough footage. So it's always better to shoot more footage than you think you'll need. And you can always use that footage again to create other additional content later on. So when you're editing your video, all that is taking all the pieces of your video, the audio, adding them to the timeline on your editing software to start building that final video. So the first thing you want to do is when you're getting ready to edit, you want to organize your footage. Stay organized, keep it simple, name your files and your shots ahead of time before you start editing. That way you know where they are. It's easy to keep up with them because you're going to have a lot of footage and it's easier to keep track of it if it's all organized and in files and named. Make your audio count. This is so important. Natural sound is so important. I don't know if you heard the audio in those and the sound effects in those two first PSAs. It's really important to balance voices, the music, the natural sound. Just remember, there are copyright guidelines, so you want to use royalty-free music or music that you have permission to use. Now, the reason why audio is so important, we always think about the video being important, but a lot of people do forget about the importance of audio. So I have the same PSA I want to show you that recently ran on social channels for AAA. And the first version has the audio, all the audio there. The second version, we took out the audio sound effects and the music. And I want you to hear the difference and how different those PSA's sound just by taking out some of the audio.
Tragedy does happen. I was awake and aware for the entire accident. I had looked over, I saw my shoe, I saw my sock, and I realized that that was my leg. My main focus was just staying alive. I know that I'm very lucky to be alive. I know that I can redesign life in a way that is still pure joy. It's not a stopping point, it just was a fork in the road.
Okay, here it is again without the audio sound effect.
Tragedy does. I was awake and aware for the entire accident. I had looked over, I saw my shoe, I saw my sock, and I realized that that was my leg. My main focus was just staying alive. I know that I'm very lucky to be alive. I know that I can redesign life in a way that is still pure joy. It's not a stopping point, it just was a fork in the road.
So audio is so important. That cannot be underscored enough. When you're doing your video, keep in mind at all times, what can I use for audio, natural sound effects or music that will enhance your PSA. Next slide. The final thing is, after you've laid down your video, you've laid down your audio, you have your text and titles. You want to use text, as you notice, and we use that to bridge between sound bites, tell the story for sound that wasn't there. Instead of a voiceover, you can use text if you want. We do that sometimes. But you want to make sure you use easy to read font. Roboto is a font I recommend. Roboto is a really good font. We use that at the Auto Club. Also, Arial is a good font, but you want to make sure it's easy to read and within your safe zones so that it doesn't get cut off when you're showing your video, because you can show it on different platforms. And that certainly is something that you want to make sure that everyone can see it no matter what platform they're viewing your video on. Next slide. The final thing I would say, get feedback, get fresh perspectives. Someone who hasn't seen your footage, make adjustments based on that constructive feedback. Usually though, I like to say, make a final version yourself, like make the complete version. Don't show people it halfway through. A lot of times people won't be able to see your vision that way. So go ahead and make the full video, then get feedback. And if you need to make adjustments, go back and then update your video that way. So that is my presentation. And I know, Roman, you have a quiz.
Did you hear that? There's another quiz coming up. And I think I want to share that that's such a key point, Roboto and Arial. Great font, right? Easy font to read. And I will tell you that is not a quiz question. So while I have this rolling here, give me a sec to launch this one. And this one's going to be 3 questions, okay? Just 3, little easier. And let's see if you're paying attention. All right, so I put those 3 on the screen there for you. And I want to share just a quick update while Daniel was doing his presentation. I've got 6 people that are in the lead with all correct answers. Now, I'm just going to say the emails, okay? That's J. Zermano, that's I. Rizzo, E. Waddell, that's M. Leon, and then A. Pamit 001, and then EVU 001, and then O. Ramos Pen. Those are the 6 that are in the lead right now. So hopefully you can get these questions right too as well. So while that's going on, please, take this moment now, and hopefully you took some copious notes that will help you for sure with this next quiz. All right. Now, while this is going on too, I also have opened up the chat. The chat is open if you have any questions that you want to ask Daniel or Cyndi during this time. Please feel free, because they are also judges in this competition. So maybe utilize this moment need to share some information if you'd like. Maybe ask a quick question that you think could benefit you during your PSA or street art creation, please feel free to do so. I'll have this quiz up for another 30 seconds. All right, another 15 seconds here. We're coming down to the wire. 5 more seconds. 2 and 1. All right, okay. So while I've got that going on, I wanted to ask if there were any questions here, because I know we're kind of a little early here ahead of time, ahead of schedule. But please utilize this moment now to ask any questions while we have Daniel and Cyndi here. The chat is open, so please go ahead and answer or type in your questions in the chat feature. I'm sure they'll be very grateful to hear any questions that you might have. Give it up for another couple seconds here. All right. Any questions at all? Please don't be shy. We're here to help you. We're here to assist you with your PSA creation. Got 2 wonderful experts here, Cyndi and Daniel. We'd love to hear any question whatsoever. Any question is welcomed. There is no right or wrong answer. All right. Okay. Well, while that's going on, I'm going to see if I can quickly do some multitasking here. Are there any other pointers and tips that you might want to share, Daniel or Cyndi, during this time as a judge? Any other insight that you want to share?
Be creative. Yeah, be creative, Roman. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. And, you know, you can always make adjustments later on if you need to.
Yeah, I agree with Daniel on that. In fact, and I think Daniel gave you some really good advice too, in terms of, you know, show your work to others. We do that a lot. You know, we conduct focus groups, and we actually, you know, we ask internally, you know, what works for you, what doesn't, before we even take things to focus groups. And it's really good to get other opinions, because sometimes you're inside, you're so involved because it's your idea, it's your baby, that sometimes it's good. I think it's good to get advice. And don't be afraid to write the strategy. I guess that would be one other thing, because I know it looks like it's a lot of extra work, but at the end of the day, it's going to focus your work a lot. We go back to those all the time. And that would be my advice.
That's some great advice there. And then once again, I also put in those 2 fonts, Roboto and Arial, in the chat for you. It looks like we've got a tie. So I have to say, the 6 people that I shared earlier, that's definitely a tie. So be on the lookout with your art teachers here. The 6 people that I mentioned got all the answers right. Phenomenal. That's awesome. Round of applause for everyone here that's participating tonight. Looks like Kylie also want to say at Streets Art Safe, we also have the opportunity for you to get mentoring. So this is a place you can show your work and get feedback from professional graphic designers and filmmakers. That's a great point. Thanks so much, Kylie. Steve here asked, how do you determine and get info on audience? Anyone want to share that at all, Cyndi? Any input on that?
In terms of who the target audience is, I mean,
that'd be a great point. Yes.
It depends on the research, I guess, that you have. I know that Jake has shared some research, but also the research that you see online, it might give you it might give you, your target audience there, or you could just determine who your target audience is based on what message you want to communicate to. Like, in my opinion, if you're going to someone your age, for instance, that could be your target audience. Or you can just look up target audiences online in terms of, Google it. Just say, what are common target audiences, and that can help you too.
That's a great point. Googling target audiences. That's a great one. Thank you, Cyndi.
Mhm.
This is a question here for Daniel. Daniel, if you're still there, I want to ask you here. Ivan asked, how do you make a script without making it sound like a robot? That's a great question.
That's a really good question. Writing like you would conversational. We call it conversational writing. Think about it as, don't try to use overcomplicated words. Write like you're writing to a third grader, and could a third grader understand what you're saying? That doesn't mean that your third grader is your target audience, but you want your message to be easily received and understood. So the more conversational you can be in your writing, the better. There's a lot of great articles out there about conversational writing if you just Google it. But that's what I would recommend.
That is such a great point. You don't want to use overcomplicated language, right? Use easy language, right? And also too, if a third grader can understand it, you're going the right direction. That's a great point there, Daniel. A couple other questions are coming in. This is great. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Let me go ahead here, and Jasmine writes, through the editing process, how can we implement the stats or research in the video to stand out without being too excessive or boring? That'd be a question for you, Daniel, there.
I think that's where your creativity has to come in, using fonts that are easy to read but stand out. If you have a dark background, use bright fonts. If you have a bright background, use darker fonts so it's easier to read and it stands out. And you don't have to put a bunch of words on the screen. Try to keep your words minimal, as few words as possible on the screen.
That's such a great point. Like, if you got dark images, right, use lighter font, right? And vice versa. If it's lighter images, use darker font. That's such a great point, Daniel. I appreciate that. Hopefully that helps understand for Jasmine. And then more importantly, as you were saying earlier, sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
I was going to say, if you look at the logo behind you, the Automobile Club of Southern California, that dark blue is the background, and then you have the white text, the letters, and it's much easier, so easy to read because it pops that way.
Absolutely. That's definitely a key point too as well. And then, like you said, don't overcomplicate it, right? Don't put too much text in a slide or a video. That's definitely really key points here. Stefano asked sorry, Cyndi, you were saying something?
Yeah, and I also wanted to say you could support what you have in the video, like in type, with what you have in audio. And if you support it, because it's a supporting message, they're all going to go together. So maybe the action in your video is going to support the stat, for instance, that you put in the visual, and then it all works together.
That's great. That's a great point there. Thank you so much, Cyndi. So Stefano asked, how long/short is the video allowed to be? And thankfully we got a representative here, Kylie, to help us out. Your video should be no longer than 30 seconds. We appreciate that, Kylie, you chiming in for that. And then Asher asked, how creative could a video be to express a PSA? Ooh, that's a good question. It's an interesting one.
I would say as creative as you want to be, but make sure you keep in mind the topic, and so that you're appropriate, since you don't want to be too creative and let that get out of.
You cut out there, Daniel. You said you don't want to be too creative in what?
And let that get out of control. So be mindful of your topic, be respectful of your topic, but at the same time, let your creativity flow.
Absolutely. And we welcome creativity, right? And this art is supposed to be creative. So make it your own, Asher, right? So be creative. We encourage you to be creative as possible.